So the big question is this: how do small businesses like yours, who feel like you're doing all the right things and going to all the right events, reach the federal buyer in a way that helps you win more contracts? That is the question, and this is the place to get your answers. My name is Neil McDonnell. Welcome to the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. Okay, let's get started. In this series, I'm sharing the top 10 steps every small business government contractor should take if you want to be successful in the federal market. I include 2 bonus steps at the end of the series just to round it up to an even dozen. In a minute, I'll walk you through step 6, which focuses on PTACs and meeting with a local counselor. First, though, this content is brought to you by the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, the only organization dedicated to the success of all small businesses in the federal space, with members from Guam to the U.S. Virgin Islands and every single state in between. Each year, roughly $125 billion is awarded to small businesses as prime contractors. Our vision is to double that number by helping small businesses truly understand the process for success. Small businesses are the backbone of America. By helping you succeed further in government contracting, we'll be strengthening American communities together. My name is Neil McDonnell, and I've been where you are now. I've been a small business owner for 20 years, building 2 successful firms selling to the federal government. I've won subcontracts with small and large prime contractors. I've won prime contracts with defense and civilian agencies. I've done things right, and I've gotten things wrong. The one thing missing, though, for me then and you now, is an easy to follow process that will lead to predictable success. That's my commitment to you. I'll provide the process. If you accept responsibility and don't blame others, you'll find you have the control to shape your future. I put together this roadmap to help you understand the top 10 steps every small business must take as they travel down the road to success in federal government contracting. You can watch a previous video I did where I briefly introduce each of these steps. In this video, we'll be talking about meeting with a local PTAC counselor and how to get the most value from that relationship. In step 6, I want to point out the importance of meeting with your local PTAC counselor. First, I'll give you a quick refresher on what PTACs are. I did a video on PTACs in the past that expands on this section, and I'll put a link to that description. I also did another PTAC video, and this one was on the Colorado PTAC and just how I explored the website. So you can take a look at that. And there's actually a third video out there that's Meet the Experts, where I had a handful of PTAC leaders and counselors come together in a panel interview online and video. And so you can watch that as they give you all sorts of good tips. Next, I'll give you some tips on preparing for a meeting with your PTAC counselor. We don't want you to go in unprepared, which could actually be a waste of time, both for them and for you. After that, I'm going to give you some tips for having a great meeting with them. And when I say great in this particular case, I mean successful, for those of you who know the difference between a great meeting and a successful meeting. Finally, I'll wrap up by giving you my 2 cents about PTACs and PTAC counselors. I just want to back up for 1 second. When I say a great meeting, it means everybody liked everybody listened. But a successful meeting is one that moves the sale forward or moves the agenda forward. So if I'm talking to a small business specialist, a successful meeting is if they introduce me to the program office. That's a successful meeting. A great meeting would be if they just listened to me. Okay, so let's talk about what are PTACs. The Procurement Technical Assistance Program is administered and funded by the Defense Logistics Agency, which in turn provides funding to local PTACs in cooperation with states, local government, and nonprofit organizations. The PTACs were established to expand the number of businesses capable of participating in government contracts, so businesses like yours. There are currently 94 PTAPs and PTACs around the country, from Guam to Puerto Rico, with over 300 locations to serve their local customers, small businesses like you. PTAC counselors from around the country can offer you a lot of services, such as helping you with questions around the day-to-day operations of your company, or planning for and identifying purchasing agencies and buyer representatives. A key area that PTACs can help with is identifying opportunities for prime contracts with agencies or subcontracts with both small and large government contractors. They can do this both through training and help around the various bid databases that are out there, but also through strategic introductions if you prove that you're ready. Let's talk about preparing for your meeting. So any meeting you go to, it doesn't matter who it's with. If it's the contracting officer, the program officer, a PTAC representative or counselor, somebody from the small business development centers, or even a fellow small business, you want to make sure you prepare. And so here's some guidance on that. My first thing on PTACs is definitely visit their websites and just see what they offer, see what guidance they provide you. Every state's slightly different, but they all provide great guidance on how to get the most out of a PTAC relationship, how to come in there and work with their counselors. Again, I did a video recently, like last week, I think, on reaching out to the Colorado PTAC counselors. And so you can take a look at that because I analyzed their website for you. I point out all the great stuff that's on there that I consider worthwhile in preparing for meeting with a counselor. The second thing here is sign up as a client. If you don't know this, most of the PTACs won't really be able to work with you until you're a client of theirs. And that just means filling out some basic information so they can track you and that you're in SAM and you're coming in working. The primary reason, frankly, for them is they have an accountability to the people who fund them, and they just need to be able to do reporting. So sign up as a client, you're on their radar, and you'll begin to move forward. They have a lot of online training. I was, again, going back to this Colorado video I did recently, looking at their training. They have training about getting started with the PTACs, training on CMMC, which is the cybersecurity maturity model certification that's out by DoD. A lot of other different training. Get in there and take training on any questions you have, anything you're unclear about, if the training looks good, and then any training you can see that's on how to get the most out of a relationship with the PTAC or government sales, things like that. The last thing I want to recommend you do is prepare a call plan. So I put out in the GovCon Chamber a call plan sheet. It's a template that's free out there. And I've got, I think, like a 30-minute hour webinar on how to actually fill this out. But in the brief, I'll tell you right now that the call plan sheet is designed to just get you prepared and write things down before you go in. It begins with something basic, which is the objectives of your call. Why are you doing a call, a meeting, et cetera? So for example, if I'm reaching out to a PTAC counselor, I might have an objective of, I'm in Colorado, I know USDA is here, and I'd like to get the counselor to make an introduction. So I have a warm introduction to that USDA representative. That'd be a great objective. And you can think of objectives along the lines of primary objective. This is the thing I really need to get. And I think it's a reasonable objective for this meeting. And then secondary. So you have a primary and secondary, because if you get your primary, you might as well go for a second one. And the secondary one could be another introduction or a follow-up meeting where we do a deep dive into something. Whatever it is, make sure you have an objective in your call plan so that you know what you were trying to get out of the meeting. It's not about what everybody's trying to get out. Objectives are really, this is what I want to get out of this meeting. Now, that's different than the second thing I'm going to tell you about is the purpose of the call. So when I talk, and just use a PTAC counselor as an example, when I talk with them, I'll share that, hey, I have these two purposes for this call. One is an introduction to my company. I'd like to talk to you about my company, share my core competencies, maybe some of my experience. So that's one purpose of the call. Another purpose is to identify or to get some recommendations from you on how I might move forward. Let's use Colorado as an example for today's video here. How would you recommend I move forward? You know in your head that you want this objective of getting an introduction to, let's say, USDA in Colorado. But in the purpose, you're saying, I just want to be able to get your recommendations. And what would it take for you to make introductions? What do you need from me before you begin to introduce me to all the people you know out there? And so that's objectives first thing, purpose second. And the third thing for a call plan are just questions. You want to write down 5 or 10 questions that you're going to ask whoever you're meeting with, but in this case, a PTAC counselor. You want to be able to make sure you have questions that will help drive the meeting. Don't just show up and say, well, PTAC counselor, what advice do you have for running my business? Well, that means you didn't take the time to actually think about where you're at. What are some of your questions, challenges, or wishes? I wish I could get into USDA. Okay, well, be prepared to ask a few questions. Who would you recommend I call first at USDA? How can I meet buyers? How can I meet program office people? How can I identify opportunities? Those are legitimate questions to begin to talk with a PTAC counselor about. One last thing about that is you don't want to go in just grilling them and asking them question after question. The idea of having the questions is so that you can naturally merge them into a conversation you're having with a PTAC counselor. So that leads me to how to get the most from the meeting with your PTAC counselor. First thing you want to do with anybody is send a read ahead. In this case, your read ahead is your capability statement. You want to make sure they're able to look at it and come prepared to ask you questions. I see your core competency is this. I see you used to work here, or you used to have customers here. You want them to give you advice right off the gate about, hey, I was looking at your capability statement. You might want to make these changes to it because in our market here in Colorado, let's use an example. Here in Colorado, we, our client base, our customer base in the government, they tend to like to see this thing on a capability statement. So you might consider that, and this is going to go with bullet 3 in a second about listen. The other thing you want to do ahead of schedule is if you do your call plan, you have some of these questions and purpose statements, you might want to send over the purpose. Hey, the purpose of the call from my perspective is this. I'm really hoping to get out of the call the chance to introduce my company to you and to find out how we can proceed in a longer term relationship, et cetera, however you define your purpose. The third bullet, listen, is very valuable, right? You've heard that line, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should be listening twice as much as we talk. That's really important here. And it's even more important with PTAC counselors because you're going in to get their advice. They're not coming to you to get your advice. They're not coming to you to learn about a new small business. They have thousands and thousands and thousands of small businesses, right? You're going in to develop a relationship. They're there to help you, absolutely. And they're very generous with their advice and their time. But when they give you advice, you want to listen and follow it. Like I just said, if they say something like, the government likes to have your DUNS code and cage code, DUNS number and cage code up on top of the capability statement. It's like, okay, throw it up on top, like take their advice. These people deal with the buyers that you're trying to go knock on the door to. And I'm just pulling one example out, but whatever this thing is that they're suggesting, hey, you want to make sure you're making calls. Maybe you need to tighten up your core competencies. It seems like you do everything, but you're a small business. Whatever they're saying, they're not trying to just blow you off and ignore the work you've put into the business. But these people have worked with hundreds, if not thousands of small businesses, and they're used to helping give you advice that will improve your business maturity and frankly, increase your likelihood of success. So make sure you listen to them. The last thing about how to get the most from the meeting, and this is something I alluded to in preparing, is you need to know your objectives. Right here, you want to confirm any action items that we're talking about. If they give you advice, you want to sit there and write down the action items that are from that advice. Hey, I'm going to update my capability statement this way. Hey, I'm going to go update my DSBS profile this way. But you also want to write down any action items maybe they took. Like, for example, if they didn't get a chance to look at your capability statement, you can ask them to take a commitment to look at it and give you some feedback. Would you shoot me an email when you get a chance to look at it with any suggestions you have for improvement? You want to get anybody you ever meet with to have a stake in the game, have some sort of action item. So, try to figure out where that fits naturally into this meeting with a PTAC counselor, but get an action item and make sure whatever you do at the end of the meeting, you're confirming it. It's important that everybody understands that. And this goes with the last part, follow up with them, right? You want to make sure you're following back up, obviously with thank you after the meeting, really appreciated that. And then, you can summarize, hey, here's what we said. Even though you're going to say it in the meeting, you can also just follow up in email. Here's what I understood the action items to be. Let me know if I missed anything. And then make sure in this call, you're trying to schedule a follow-up. Could we touch base in 2 weeks? I'm going to go away, kind of understand some of what you said, take some action that you told me to do, and I'd like to follow back up with you. These people are not one call counselors. This is a long-term relationship. If you develop this relationship, they will watch you mature. They will watch you listening to their advice, and they will want to then begin to introduce you to the federal buyers that they know in their area because they know that you're ready and that when they make the recommendation, the federal buyers will benefit from having a small business that is really more procurement ready than perhaps they were before they met with the PTAC counselor. Okay, so let me give you some of my random thoughts on here, Neil's 2 cents, right? First off, I love saying this, that procurement is in the name, right? Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Their whole, and I know I'm making a broad statement here for anybody who gets into the nickels and dimes here, but procurement is their whole game. They exist. I think I said this right at the beginning, right? That the reason PTACs came around is to help expand the number of businesses capable of participating in government contracting. They want to help you with procurements. What's not in their name is, hey, we can help you figure out whether you want to start a business, Technical Assistance Center, right? They're not trying to tell you whether you should be in the restaurant business or the government contracting. In fact, you'd probably be better off not talking to a PTAC counselor until you've got a solid understanding of what you want to do with your business. And that guidance comes from the small business development centers. Of course, PTAC counselors can help, but that's not where their power is. Their power to help you is in the procurement game. And so pay attention to that as you go forward. Don't be asking them questions about, how can I set up a bank account on my website? That's not where you want to take, that's not where you want to get advice from on those things. Here, you want to sit there and say, how can I grow my company in the federal space? They will have advice for you as you go forward. And that goes into the second bullet, right? Is PTACs exist to help. One of their primary ways of contributing to your success is helping you look at an RFP. They help you identify opportunities, see what's out there, but they'll look at a RFP with you if you talk to them long enough in advance, right? Don't come to them the minute you see it on FBO or sam.gov, right? You want to be looking at opportunities that are long range forecast, and you got it 6, 12 months out, and you schedule some time with your counselor and say, hey, can we talk about this RFP? What do you think? It seems like a fit for my company, but what do you think? And get their guidance on that. And if you have a good counselor and you give them enough time, they'll even try to help you with proposals, not writing it, but giving you some guidance. Okay, looking in here, make sure you touch on this government challenge, or they really highlight this part as a criteria. Make sure you're paying attention to that. They may even read your proposal drafts and give you a little bit of feedback. That's not their main responsibility, but keep in mind that they can help you with those RFPs and proposals. And as you develop the relationship with the PTAC counselor, ask them, when should I be coming back to you? What type of help can I expect from you? And what's unreasonable of me to ask? Okay, the third bullet here is about asking for introductions to federal buyers. PTACs who are in a particular area know many of the buyers. In Washington, D.C. area for Virginia and Maryland, it might be a little harder because there's so many buyers and so many agencies here. But when you start going out into different areas like Colorado or Oklahoma, these people, it's a small world, and many of the federal buyers are coming to the PTAC events that are once or twice a year. And so they know these people. And if you're procurement ready, then it's reasonable to ask them to make an introduction to that buyer, whether that buyer is a small business professional, a contracting professional, or a program office. Many of these people know program office folks as well. And if you're procurement ready, meaning you're ready for selling to the government, then they'd be happy to introduce you. The last bullet I have here, and where I'm going to wrap up, is you want to be on their radar. You want to be seen. Think about a big ship out in the ocean, and you have this radar, or an airplane. They have the radar, and it goes out 5, 10, 25 miles, let's say, and you see little dots on the radar. That's all they pay attention to. Anything that's 50 or 100 miles off, they don't pay attention to because it's not on their radar. Make sure you're on the PTAC counselor's radar. You're going to go into a PTAC environment, let's say Colorado, and they've got 5 or 10 counselors, but one will be assigned to you. You want to follow up with these people on a regular basis. Talk with them about it. Say, I want to make sure I'm on your radar, and I'm getting your advice, obviously, whenever I need it, but I'm also just in your mind, so that if you hear from a small business professional or some federal buyer, you're aware of what we do, and you might make a recommendation if you feel comfortable with that. So talk with them about how often would be a good time for us to touch base. Is that every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks? And then in between that times you're actually having a meeting, make sure you attend. Like, let's say once every 2 weeks, you could attend one of their free webinars. And I was just doing this with Colorado, in the video I did the other day. In there, you can see the people who are hosting it, and they'd love to see it. It's like, oh, Neil's showing up again. And it's just, when you're there, you're on their radar, and you're in their mind for when somebody says, hey, I'm looking for a business like yours. They go, you know what? I know exactly who to refer you to. It's this company I talk to every so often, and they got their ducks in a row. I'm going to make the recommendation. So be on their radar and be seen. Okay, if you found this content valuable, others will too. Please give it a thumbs up so they can find it. If you'd like to connect with me personally, do so on LinkedIn. We often do free training webinars and interview federal buyers. Sign up for the GovCon Chamber's email list to be notified about these opportunities at www.govconchamber.com. And finally, please consider becoming a sustaining member of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. Help us keep bringing you great content like this for $1 a day. I'm Neil McDonnell, wishing you great success.